The FDA plans to integrate generative AI to enhance efficiency in evaluating drugs. We don't need more efficiency in that. We need to slow things down. And then we don't have the government reneging on what they said about the COVID vax for pregnant women. Big tech censorship, artificial intelligence, the U.S. government changing its stance on the COVID vaccine, and potential biblical prophecy fulfillment. This has been a big news week, so let's get into it right now. Welcome to Cutting Edge Faith. I'm Ryan Howard. This podcast is here to help you understand the times, stand for truth, and grow in your faith. Now, I'm introducing here a new weekly briefing. This is something that I've been excited about doing for a while, and I thought, let's just get the boat off the dock and start it out, and we'll see how it goes. Please let me know if you like this. My goal here is to give you a quick overview of the headlines and the ones that you need to know, and to have this be sort of a one-stop shop for you to know the consequential headlines, to know the truth behind the headlines, what's really going on, have a spiritual significance behind that, and sharing that when that's the case, and getting past the media bias and the narrative. And that's really what we want to do here. I mean, this Cutting Edge Faith is to help you understand the times, stand for truth, and grow in your faith. So we need to know what's going on around the world. We need to have a biblical view of it. But in knowing what's going on and helping you see God's sovereignty in all of it, then that can help embolden your faith, embolden you to take a stand, see your position where God has placed you, for you to represent His interests, and that can help you grow in your faith as well, because you see that there is no divide between the spiritual and the physical. You know, we should be doing, and I'm not talking about some weird new agey stuff. What I'm talking about is everything has spiritual implications. That's exactly what I mean. And so I want to talk about these news briefings, this news briefing. And this is not a news show. This is not even a news commentary show. What this is to help bring things that are consequential and matter, and we need to know what's going on, and to give you a biblical view of those things. And sometimes, you know, I'll be bringing my experience in business, in politics, in media, these different areas, and just giving you a different perspective so that you can really understand what's going on, what is the mechanisms behind the scenes, and what we're seeing is different than what's really going on. And we all know that ever since, especially since 2020 and the C-19 debacle, pandemic, whatever you want to call it. And so this is something where I'm just going to go through the headlines quickly, and then I'm going to circle back and give you my commentary on it. So if you just want the headlines, you'll just need to stay for the first few minutes. You know, I want these to be very quick hitters, but the problem is there's so much happening, and there is so much that needs to be said about it that, you know, it's kind of hard to be concise. So that's why I want to run through the headlines quickly. But that's, you know, I want that to continue to be a staple of this podcast, is to have concise things that you can digest quickly. And so let's run through the headlines quick, and then I'll circle back and give you some commentary. I think this week there are some critical things that you should really listen to the commentary for. So you're going to want to stick around for some of that. There's some big things happening, and well, let's just dive right in. So first, we got Christian news. So Open Doors released its new global watch list for the worst places in the world for Christian persecution. Down in Florida, we have 1,800 Florida highway troopers that were given the federal credentials to work with the immigration and customs enforcement. We have fluoride potentially being removed from the water down in Florida. We have HHS planning to stop recommending the COVID vaccine for children and pregnant women and teens. We got to dive into that. We have the FBI, Kash Patel, said that they are planning to decentralize basically all their investigations and get the FBI employees, 1,500 FBI employees around the United States instead of centralized in Washington. And we have the FDA announcing AI integration across departments to help do drug approvals more efficiently. Wow, do I have some things to say about that. And we also have an AI tech and biotech update. So the UK passed the first of its kind AI copyright law. And so this has a lot of implications for artists and authors and intellectual property. And so we'll dive into that in just a little bit. And we have Trump's visit to the Middle East. This potentially could be reshaping U.S. strategy, could be, he kind of sidelined Israel. And so we need to dive into that just a little bit. And we have some things that Iran is up to. They gave missiles to Russia. Their state-run media talked about that. And also we have Iran-backed militias that are gathering near the northern border of Israel. So could that be something related to Ezekiel 38 and this big attack on Israel? Well, we need to talk about it. Now, kind of wrapping it up here with some of this tech stuff, is the House Judiciary Committee in the U.S. They have a hearing on big tech censorship. And that it's very interesting what's going on there, and that's very important. So we need to talk about that. And then there's another thing I'm sure you've heard of. It's called the Real ID, and that's federalizing the identification instead of having state-level driver's license only. And so, wow, there's a lot of implications for that as well. So there you have it. That's the headlines that I'm going to talk about. We're going to dive into, but that's really kind of what's going on around the world. I didn't get into much detail in the headline as far as Trump in the Middle East, but there are some very monumental keystone type things that he's done. And so we need to dive into just a few of those. So, all right, there's the update. Now let's go ahead and dive right in. So I did an episode earlier this week on open doors and this new watch list. So the summary is there's 380 million Christians under harsh persecution around the world in all these countries, including places like India and China and North Korea, but Pakistan, Syria, all these places where we're talking about doing business with and having these agreements with. So I did an episode, and that's 1 in 7 Christians, 380 million Christians. That's 1 in 7 Christians worldwide. And so I did an episode talking about what's going on with that, and then also the 3 different committees and things that are have been established in the United States government, and what Trump should do in order to help alleviate some of this. And so I highly recommend you check out that episode if you haven't already. So turning over to politics, this one there's so much to say about this related to the COVID vax and the jab, whatever you want to call it, gene therapy, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. So I did an episode on the real reason why they wanted this approved. And if you remember, and I would recommend you check that out because there's a lot of insights behind in the pharmaceutical industries and what's going on that I shared there. But what's going on is they had the emergency use authorization, and that basically gave indemnification. It removed the liability for these vaccine manufacturers. And so there was no recourse. If somebody had an injury, they couldn't go back on them. And so I said, why do they want it on the childhood schedule? Well, that's because all vaccines on the childhood schedule also have indemnification. They are protected from liability. They can't be sued for that. It's just insanity. So they went from the Emergency Use Authorization Act, skipped over the normal process, which is already corrupt anyway, but they skipped that and went right to the childhood vaccine schedule. The reason is because then they wanted to keep their immunity. They wanted to keep their legal protection so they couldn't be sued. Well, now let's read this summary here. It says the Department of Health and Human Services plans to stop recommending routine COVID-19 vaccinations for children, teens, and pregnant women, a senior agency official confirmed to the Epoch Times. So that was also reported in the Wall Street Journal. And it says currently the CDC and prevention recommended that individuals 6 months and older receive an updated COVID-19 inoculation. CDC added the COVID-19 vaccines to the vaccination schedule in 2023. I want to punch the wall. Following a recommendation from its vaccine advisory panel. Yeah, there's no conflicts of interest there. I do need to do an episode just on the revolving door between the FDA or CDC and the vaccine pharmaceutical industries, And so don't worry, there's not going to be a sponsor pop-up that says from Pfizer, like Fox News and all these others that are supposed to be non-partial with some of these things. But around 13% of children and 14% of pregnant women have taken the updated COVID shot, according to the CDC. And you see some countries, many people have had issues. And so that's something that we really need to be keeping an eye on. And it really shows the weakness in that process that is used to get things into the schedule, to get things approved. And I mentioned that FDA is going to be using AI to help streamline that. And so there's so much to unpack here, but just know that, they were emergency. It was an emergency to do it. Then they rapidly got it on the schedule, and now they're saying, probably it's not needed. Well, it's almost like maybe they got some data or something, or who knows what. Well, thank God that RFK Jr. is at the top of HHS now, and we should be seeing a lot more of these rational things happening. And if we don't, I guess we can blame the bureaucratic system. I kind of highly doubt that he's going to be compromised because he's been already sacrificing his own reputation for decades, fighting against this stuff with the children'shealthdefense.org and all kinds of stuff. So I highly recommend checking out his stuff if you haven't already. But he's been very critical of all of this stuff, and maybe he's dressing up his language a little more to be a little more palatable, because I think that people will reject what he's saying just because of how he's saying it, instead of actually looking at the merits of what's saying. So it is valuable to be diplomatic in some cases, so that people will actually take a moment to hear what you're saying and not just ignore what you're saying. And so that's something to just keep in mind. In a minute, I want to talk about the AI thing with the FDA. But first, the federal FBI agents are going to be moving around the U.S., and that sounds like, oh, that could be bad because they're going to be watching us. And I suppose that could be the case. But the problem was, they centralized it. They used to be located at these different offices all around the U.S., and then they could investigate these terrorism threats. Well, they should have been investigating global terrorism threats against the U.S., not domestic people and moms and dads going to soccer games. But the thing is, they centralized it, and so that means they were all located in Washington, D.C., and they couldn't really give a real evaluation of the different cases. So it's better to have it decentralized. But of course, this all falls on whether or not we can trust the people that are in charge. And so more to come on that. So the FDA announces AI integration across departments. So the FDA plans to integrate generative AI across all departments by June 30th, 2025 to enhance efficiency in evaluating drugs, foods, and medical devices. This initiative follows a successful pilot program and aims to streamline regulatory processes. This is ridiculous. This is infuriating. What did they do in the 90s? They said, you know what? We don't have enough money. We don't have enough money to review all these new drugs and things that are coming in. So let's just open the door so that the pharmaceutical companies can pay to expedite drug approvals. Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, that has inflated to like half the budget of the FDA. And these drug reviews are like 80% funded by that money. So, well, yeah, no conflict of interest there. Half the budget for the regulating agency is paid for by the companies that agency is to regulate. You can't make this stuff up. And so let's do it even more efficiently, because it's not enough money to let them pay for it. Now we got to use AI, and then we can blame the algorithm when something gets approved that shouldn't have been approved. Like what are they using AI for? Like, they don't have the data. They don't, like the FDA, CDC, they don't have the raw data from these companies. Nobody sees it. There's no panel. There's nobody except that company that sees it. And it's like this honor system. So we need to dive into that more, maybe on another episode, but that's just absolute insanity. That's ridiculous. So, all right, yeah, we don't need more efficiency in that. We need to slow things down. And then we don't have the government reneging on what they said about the COVID vax for pregnant women. Like, you got to be kidding me. Oh, okay, yeah, never mind. Yeah, we changed that now. We got some data. We got some, we know more now. And yeah, maybe we shouldn't have done it so fast. And okay, yeah. I'm sorry, that's just insanity. Okay, so continuing on the AI front, let's see, in UK, they passed the first of its kind copyright law. So basically, this is a big regulation shift, and so AI is moving faster than anybody can keep up with. And the UK passed legislation to mandate that developers of this generative AI, tools like ChatGPT and Claude AI, and these image generators, they must disclose the full list of copyrighted content used to train their models. And lawmakers said that this is necessary to protect artists, authors, and intellectual property holders. And so I do think there is some merit to this, but as with anything, when the government gets involved, it usually gets messed up and it's not done well. And so it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. But that law takes effect in Q4 of this year, 2025, and enforcement and oversight is given to the UK's AI Transparency Board. So who knows what is going to come from that, but of course that will probably be sweeping westward across the pond here to the US. So more to come on that. We will see, but it is something that needs to be discussed. But yeah, it's just like our digital bill of rights. The US, we should have already had a digital bill of rights in place, which would be similar to property rights. And I've done other episodes on that. So the next headline, turning over to the Middle East. And so I'm just going to read a little summary here because there's a lot that happened, and I'm not going to go into all of it. I just want you to be aware of it. So it says President Trump's May 13th to May 16th tour of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE secured over $2 trillion in deals, lifted sanctions on Syria, and emphasized economic diplomacy while notably bypassing Israel. So he was the first president, I think the first president ever, but at least in modern history, whose first international trip was not to Canada, Mexico, or another NATO ally. So he went to the Middle East. So this is saying something. And so it's quite interesting here. But let's see some of these deals. So it was $600 billion pledge from Saudi Arabia, $96 billion Boeing deal with Qatar Airways, and a $1.4 billion AI infrastructure agreement with the UAE. So those are pretty significant. I think that it's important that my basic summary is this. It makes sense for the U.S. to be getting closer with these countries because otherwise they're going to be allying with Iran and Russia and China. And so we need to be doing what we can to insert ourselves from a global geopolitical perspective so that those global powers are not being aligned. And this is a good step in that direction to tie these economic things together so that in order for these countries to partner with China or Russia, they would have to act against their own interest because of that tie together with the U.S. And so it makes sense, but I went on a rant earlier in the episode I mentioned about the Christian persecution that we really need to use this as a leverage point to say you need to deal with the Christian persecution in your country. Like all of these countries like Syria, Afghanistan, well, we're not doing deals with Afghanistan, but Syria, India, China, even Pakistan and Iraq, all these different countries, Iran. We're not necessarily making deals with all of them, but the ones where we need to be putting pressure on them to fix the situation and to do something about it because these governments can do something about it. So that's a summary there. Next up, we have Iran reaches missile deal with Russia. So basically, they got a deal to provide Russia with surface-to-surface missiles, and that raises alarms about coordinated aggression and escalation. So the U.S. State Department condemned the deal, but offered no clear plan to counter it. And so there's a growing alliance between Russia, Iran, and China, and that has fueled speculation that the emerging infrastructure of post-Western world order. So, like I said, everything we need to do, we should not be pushing Russia closer to China or to Iran. And so that gets into the next headline, which maybe this is related to Ezekiel 38, which is a huge attack on Israel. So Iran-backed militias are massing near the northern border of Israel. So Israeli intel confirms Iranian proxy militias amassing near Lebanon and Syrian borders, and that raises suspicions of a surprise multi-front war. Of course, they're still dealing with the stuff in Gaza, and so it's a pretty big deal what's going on there. We got other details here. Along with smaller Shiite militias, it's reportedly receiving advanced weapons from Iran, including drones and precision missiles. Israeli intelligence suggests these proxies have been positioned for potential synchronized attacks. And so Prime Minister Netanyahu has briefed the military and spiritual leaders, calling it a critical moment. So Ezekiel 38, 15 to 16, you will come from your place out of the uttermost parts of the north, and you will come up against my people Israel, that the nations may know me when through you, O Gog, I vindicate my holiness before their eyes. So this is around Gog and Magog. Now, I'm not making any predictions here. I'm just bringing this to your attention, putting this on the table. I would suggest go study Ezekiel 38. I think it's great to not necessarily get lost and in the depths of trying to figure everything out, but it's more around just, hey, God is sovereign. He is in control. He is in charge. All right, the last couple things here are the House Judiciary hearing on big tech censorship. Now, I'm going to read this thing here. It's a paragraph, but I think it's important, and then I'll give a quick commentary, and then we'll be able to wrap up here. So it says, on May 15th, the House Judiciary Committee here in the U.S. held a key hearing titled The Censorship Industrial Complex, How the Government Covertly Censors Americans Online. Testimony from investigative journalists and former platform employees confirmed that the federal agencies, including the FBI and DHS, have direct lines of communication with tech companies to flag posts for takedown. Did you hear that? The U.S. telling these companies, the U.S. government telling companies to take down these posts. These posts included dissenting views on COVID-19, election integrity, and gender ideology, many of which turned out to be factually accurate but politically inconvenient. Wow. Republican lawmakers argued that this is a clear First Amendment violation, with Representative Jim Jordan warning that, quote, the government cannot outsource censorship to private actors and still claim to uphold free speech, end quote. Draft legislation being discussed includes requiring full transparency logs of government platform interactions and stripping liability protections from platforms that collude with state actors. That is fantastic. The liability protection is the issue, because if somebody gets their deplatformed and then they lose money for whatever reason, whether it's the sponsorship, ads, whatever, not having views that they should have had, then they should be able to go after YouTube or go after Facebook or go after whoever in order to recoup those losses if it was done maliciously or in violation of the agreement or First Amendment or that sort of thing. Now, First Amendment is really related to the government acting that way. But, there's a whole thing around whether these companies, are they a platform or are they a publisher? If they're a publisher, they can tell you what you can and cannot say, because that's, then they have liability for it, like a newspaper or like me. Like if I just go around making up stuff, I could be sued for it. But YouTube should be more like a telephone company. It's a platform. It's not a publisher. A telephone company is not going to be sued if somebody's making a drug deal over the telephone. Like they're a platform. So that's really the issue. That's the Communications 230 debacle. That's what needs to be clarified. Now, of course, Democrats on the committee largely defended the practice of content moderation as necessary to protect public safety, but stopped short of addressing specific examples of political bias. So finally putting the spotlight on this in the U.S. Congress, this censorship industrial complex. But is this going to be talk, or are they going to have the backbone to actually move on this and defund it and get the stuff and regulations in place in order to actually move the needle on this? So we'll see. So finally here, Real ID. This is the Real ID Act, which is, as of May 17th, is in effect across the United States. Enforcement began on May 7th, 2025, requiring all travelers aged 18 and over to present a Real ID compliant driver's license or another accepted form of identification such as a U.S. passport or military ID to board domestic flights to access certain federal facilities. What is a Real ID? It's a license marked with a star in the top right corner. And so it's an enhanced driver's license that's issued by, some states already do that. But why is this an issue? Well, right now, the state driver's license systems are all separate. You have 50 separate systems. They're not talking to each other. There's no government driver's license ID system. And what this does is brings the potential for federalizing it and bringing all that together. And when we talk about censorship, we talk about having a social credit score. We talk about all that, like just centralization in general must be avoided. Like we don't want that. We want separation of powers. We want decentralization. And so that's why this is an issue. So this is already moving fast. Kristi Noem, who is in charge of all of the area of government that is dealing with this, seems to be all for it, which I'm shocked by some of that. So we just got to keep an eye on it. It might be a good idea for you to reach out to your state level representatives and your U.S. representatives and senators and state level senators as well, and just let them know that you don't want this and they need to reverse this. So, well, that was a lot to cover. I hope that blessed you. I want to know what you think about this. Do you like this? Do you just want the headlines? Do you want the commentary? Do you like this big rundown? Would you prefer something where I just pick one or two and go deeper into it? I may be also doing that during the week, but really the goal here is just to get you equipped. You know what's going on. You know a good take and perspective on it and a biblical view. So, hey, make sure you go over and check out the other episodes. If you're on YouTube, like and subscribe. Leave your comments below. Anything that I missed, anything we need to have been talking about, and tell me what you think about this. If you're on the audio, you can send me a text message. Just find the link in the show notes. And as always, go to howtogrowyourfaith.com and you can get the 5 biggest mistakes Christians are making in growing their faith. And you'll get that through an educational email course and set your faith on fire. All right, thanks for joining. God bless, and we'll see you in the next episode.